Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to challenge a fundamental assumption about what makes a champion. We're sort of wired to celebrate the dominant athlete, the one who wins every single time. But what if a true legend is defined not by that dominance, but by relentless, almost agonizing persistence? We're undertaking a deep dive into the life of the Japanese racehorse Stay Gold. His career was officially summed up with this title, The Golden Journey That Never Gave Up. Our mission is to really analyze the sources and understand how a horse famous for finishing second, for being the ultimate near miss, managed to capture the public imagination and become this massively influential stallion.
And that story is fundamentally about endurance. Stay Gold's career shows you that if you hang around long enough, even if you're constantly, outgunned, the journey itself can become the prize. What's critical to remember here is his pedigree. He was sired by the legendary Sunday Silence, so expectations were sky high, but his path it defied every typical trajectory for a horse with that kind of blood. He struggled right from the very beginning.
Okay, so let's unpack that difficult beginning. He was born in 1994, and right away, things were slow. He didn't even make his competitive debut until December of his 3-year-old season, which is already pretty late for a top prospect, isn't it?
Oh, it's very late.
And the records show his early career was just a comedy of errors and setbacks. We're talking about recurring bone inflammation, constant interruptions to his training, and famously, an incident where he was disqualified for literally running off the course mid-race. It sounds like chaos.
It was. It took him until May of his 4-year-old season just to win his maiden race.
And why does that timing matter so much?
It matters because of the classics. The classics are, the biggest, most defining races for a young horse. They run in the spring of the 3-year-old season.
Well,
missing those is usually a career death knell.
That's where the value's made.
Exactly. Those wins establish immediate market value. They define a horse as a champion. So by the time Stay Gold finally won his first race, his chance at that early glory, that huge stud fee, it was already over. He was relegated to the slow, painful climb up the ranks.
And this is where his identity was really forged, right?
This is it. Once he started moving through the allowance and open classes, a pattern emerged that would define him for years. It didn't matter what the grade was or the distance. The result was almost always a new miss. He was always strong enough, always brave enough to put himself right in the thick of the fight, but he just lacked that one final explosive burst to pass the winner. He'd settle for second or third or fourth over and over and over again.
That sounds brutal. I have to ask, looking at these records, why didn't the team just retire him sooner? Surely years of that frustration, finishing second in big races, losing that early stud value.
Yeah.
It must have made him economically unviable, right? Why run him for 5 more years?
Well, that's a key question, and it speaks to both economics and culture. First, he was immensely consistent. Even without winning, he was always scraping prize money at the highest level.
So he was paying his way.
And second, his pedigree meant there was always that glimmer of potential. But culturally, the public started to claim him. The historical accounts all suggest that fans just loved his honesty. They saw him as the embodiment of, the common struggle.
The ultimate underdog.
Exactly, and that resonated so deeply in Japan. So instead of being scorned, he was embraced. You mentioned the sources noting how fans joked his major wins were these tiny, insignificant races like the Akanko Tokubetsu.
Right.
He became a fixture, almost a meme, on internet message boards. He was the symbol of the person who tries their absolute hardest but just never gets the luck. His fame was built on effort, not victory.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me. The context of who he was losing to. Because if he was running a weak era, all those second place finishes would just be, embarrassing.
Absolutely. But he was fighting in one of the most brutal periods in Japanese racing history. The late 90s, early 2000s, that era was dominated by horses that became certified legends. Stay Gold was trying to win while battling genuine titans.
Like who?
Well, think about it. He raced against Silent Suzuka, who was just unbelievably fast.
Front-running machine.
A machine. And then TM Opera O, a horse so dominant, he's still called the end of the century king. He won 7 G1 races in a row.
Wow.
And he was also battling Meisho Dodo, who was another fantastic horse, often stuck in second behind Opera O and Narita Top Road. Stay Gold was he was trapped. Too talented for the lower ranks, but stuck under a blanket of historic brilliance. Always just outside the spotlight, always chasing a legend's shadow.
I can't imagine that frustration, year after year just watching those champions cross the line ahead of you. But after years of this grind, Patience finally delivered a moment of glory. This was in the year 2000.
Right, and he was 7 years old by then.
Ancient by racing standards. He reunited with the jockey Yutaka Take for the Meguro Kinnan, a G2 race. And the material really highlights this. This was a horse that had run nearly 50 times with only a few wins in minor races.
The Meguro Kinnan, it wasn't a world championship, but the circumstances just made it feel monumental. The historical coverage of the race details him unleashing this furious late charge from way back in the field. And he finally got his head in front for a graded stakes victory.
And this is the detail that truly captures how the public felt. When he crossed that line, the Tokyo crowd absolutely erupted. We learned from the research that even though it was a G2, on a rainy Saturday, the noise, the sheer emotional explosion, it was described as sounding like the roar for a major G1 title.
It was less about the race's prestige and more about that collective sigh of relief, you know? The horse who always tried finally delivered.
And that G2 win was the turning point. It gave his team the guts to try something, well, truly unprecedented.
In early 2001, at 8 years old, Stay Gold was shipped halfway across the world.
To the Middle East for the Dubai Shima Classic. They were putting the perennial runner-up on the global stage.
But the journey was devastating for him.
Yeah, the logistical hurdles were immense. Records show he arrived completely drained from the flight. He was barely eating. He looked thin, exhausted, just completely unfit to race. And who's waiting for him there? Only Fantastic Light, arguably one of the strongest, most feared turf horses in the world at that time.
Nobody gave him a prayer.
No one. Given his condition and his history, it seemed impossible.
But the race that unfolded was just legendary.
Despite the exhaustion, Stay Gold found a new gear. He challenged Fantastic Light toe-to-toe down that final stretch. It was this agonizing head-to-head duel that went right down to the wire.
And in the photo finish,
He won.
right?
By a nose. A horse that struggled to win his maiden race 3 years earlier had just beaten the world's best.
An unbelievable upset. And yet, the narrative of his persistent bad luck just continued. And here is the cruel twist that perfectly defines his entire career.
I know. At the time of this international victory over a certified champion, the Dubai Shima Classic had not yet achieved official G1 status.
It was still a G2. He had literally beaten the world.
And still wasn't a G1 winner. The golden journey wasn't finished. Unbelievable.
So he's 8 years old, he's traveled the world, beaten a world champion, and still doesn't have that title.
And because of contract issues around his delayed stud career, he had to race for one more season. And the heartbreak just immediately returned.
The Kyoto Daishoten.
Yes. Later that year, he runs in the Kyoto Daishoten and seemingly crosses the line first. But the celebration is cut short. He's disqualified for interference. He drifted severely to the left in the stretch run and caused a major accident behind him.
Another victory, another headline-making disappointment just snatched away.
That drifting habit was almost like a physical manifestation of his competitive intensity, wasn't it?
Maybe even his frustration. But the team refused to be beaten by it. They addressed it directly, using special equipment and training to physically correct his tendency to veer. He ran a strong, honest race in the Japan Cup, proving the fix worked. But everyone knew the end was near.
So the team makes a fateful final decision. Instead of the prestigious Arima Kinnan at home,
They would retire him overseas. One final run in the Hong Kong base.
So we arrive at Sha Tin in Hong Kong, December 2001, the final 51st race of the Golden Journey. And this is where it just gets cinematic. The race starts terribly. The leader, a horse named Bekrar, pulls way clear of the field.
And Stay Gold once again is struggling, and true to form, he starts to drift.
But this time, he drifts to the right.
And this is the stunning detail from the accounts. Because he was pinned right against the inside rail, he couldn't drift any further. He was physically forced to run in a straight line.
His only option was to move forward. And so he delivered the greatest stretch run of his entire life.
Step by punishing step. The 8-year-old warrior, the near-miss specialist, closed that massive gap on the leader.
He lunged at the finish line. He won by a single head.
After 50 races, 5 years of fighting titans, enduring jokes, traveling the world, suffering all that heartbreak.
Stay Gold finally, truly secured his first and only G1 win.
And his name on the card that day really felt prophetic, didn't it? Golden Journey.
It was the perfect ending. He was retired immediately after that win. The next month, fans gathered at Kyoto Racecourse for a huge retirement ceremony. The records confirm it was fittingly set to Stevie Wonder's song, Stay Gold. He retired not as the best on paper with just one G1, but maybe as the most beloved figure in modern Japanese racing.
He proved that character can transcend statistics.
But the story doesn't end there, does it? When he went to stud, expectations were still surprisingly low.
Very low. The market was saturated with other sons of Sunday silence who had, far more impressive G1 records. Many people in the industry suspected his lack of raw speed meant his genes wouldn't produce superstars.
And that assumption was just fundamentally wrong.
Completely wrong. Stay Gold didn't just become a successful sire, he became the progenitor of a new competitive dynasty. The literature suggests that the genes he passed down weren't for pure speed, but for his signature traits: extreme tenacity, competitive spirit, and crucially, a highly unpredictable, almost wild personality.
And we need to give his kids the credit they deserve. Our research refers to his offspring as champions, monsters, and even geniuses and madmen. He sired multiple champions like Dream Journey, Nakamafesta, and then the two true icons of his lineage, Orfevre and Goldship.
Let's just focus on those two for a second to really understand this legacy. Orfevre was a generational talent, a Triple Crown winner, but he inherited his father's temperament completely. He was notorious for suddenly refusing to run or bolting after races. He won 2 Ari McKinnons, but he was always a handful.
And then there's Goldship. If you look up eccentric in a racing dictionary, you'll find him. Goldship became famous for his erratic behavior. Records show he would sometimes refuse to leave the gate or slow down mid-race for fun, only to unleash this furious, unstoppable surge at the end.
His fans adored him because he was honest, competitive, and utterly unpredictable, just like his dad.
So that lineage confirms the lasting insight of Stay Gold. His bloodline became famous not for smooth dominance, but for having the heart and the sheer bloody-minded refusal to give up.
And even though Stay Gold died suddenly in 2015 from an aortic aneurysm, his influence, through his sons and now grandsons, is absolutely secure in racing history.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more.